Tonight, the January 6th committee meets to hold Mark Meadows in contempt for defying a subpoena for more documents and for a deposition. The committee calls Meadows a central insurrection witness and is releasing some evidence to back that up. The evidence includes an email Meadows sent claiming the National Guard would be ready to, quote, protect pro-Trump people around January 6th. That email, part of a lengthy report detailing Meadows' interactions with key Big Lie backers and January 6th organizers. With me to share their reporting and their insights, CNN's Dana Bash, CNN's John Harwood, and Tia Mitchell of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Meadows initially was cooperating, then he pulled back. So the committee says it has no choice but to hold him in contempt. Just a short time ago, his lawyer sent this to the committee saying, no, you shouldn't do that. We should keep negotiating. But the committee seems pretty determined, saying, OK, fine, contempt.
Yeah, and I think the committee is saying, you know, you were cooperating, you gave us documents, and now you don't even want to talk to us about the documents that you gave us to help us understand what we're reading and the story behind them. In addition, those documents show that he was talking about that rally on January 6th with people who were not the president, who were not working at the White House. So I think there are a lot of questions about whether he can truly claim executive privilege. And they have, you know, they have the evidence to say, well, is all of this protected?
And the evidence is important because, remember, we focus too often on that horrific day, just January 6th. The committee is trying to go from Election Day through Insurrection Day. What was the coordination? Who knew what? Who was raising money? And Meadows, from what we do see here, was pretty central to a lot of big questions, John Harwood. This is one piece. He exchanged text messages with and provided guidance to an organizer of the January 6th rally on the Ellipse after the organizer told him that, quote, things have gotten crazy and I desperately need some direction. In addition, Mark Meadows participated in another such call just days before the January 6th attack with Mr. Trump, members of Congress, attorneys for the Trump reelection campaign, and some 300 state and local officials to discuss the goal of overturning certain states' electoral college results. Let me translate. To discuss the goal of somehow finding a way to cheat and reverse the election.
He was in deep on this thing. He's tried to make a distinction, and his lawyers have. When the PowerPoint surfaced the other day, said, well, he received this, he didn't originate it or didn't pass it on. But if you're the White House Chief of Staff and you don't shut down discussions like this, you're part of it. And it is clear that not just Trump and not just a few fringe extremists, Mike Flynn, Sidney Powell, Rudy Giuliani on the outside were involved. People within the White House in the most senior positions were assisting this process, sustaining this process, encouraging Trump to keep going. And in terms of the committee now, Mark Meadows has been juggling three balls. I don't want to get indicted. I want to sell some books. And I want to stay on the good side of the extremist wing of the Republican Party led by Donald Trump. And that's why we see these shifting stances.
It is remarkable, again, to the point the committee has done a ton of work, 200 plus witnesses, a lot of documents. They say these fights with the Steve Bannons and the Mark Meadows tend to overshadow the case they've been building. But when you read through what he was part of, he is central here. And obviously he's at Trump's side most of the time. So not only does he have everything that came his way, but he knows how it was given to and reacted to by the former president.
Such an important point. Donald Trump famously doesn't text. He doesn't email. And he communicates with his top aide, his assistant, and also people who are near him. He sort of barks out orders, text somebody X, text somebody else Y. And so one of the questions is how much of that is in here. But even if it's not, like John was saying, the notion that the White House chief, again, this is one of those moments we have to stop, take a breath, and say, this is not normal, this is not okay. The White House chief of staff participating in any of these discussions, never mind what these text messages reveal, which is scores of discussions, is remarkable. One other point I want to make that we were talking about before coming on, another reality that has come to light is that Mark Meadows used Gmail accounts, private accounts, used what's known as Signal, which is kind of a more secure text message app, and also text messages. Can you imagine if Hillary Clinton did that?
Yeah. Let's another one of the people who ran Hillary Clinton up the flagpole for having an email server installed in her house is now doing 10 times that with private email accounts. And so Meadows says, as you make the point, that he received a lot of things from a lot of the Trump my word, crazies out there trying to overturn the election, including this PowerPoint presentation, that there are different versions of it floating around. But if you look at it, it's essentially how to stage a coup. It's how, what can we do? What things can we do to gum up the works, get in the way of traffic? It was reportedly given to him by a retired U.S. Army Colonel, Phil Waldron, who believes things like this.
A lot of movements of votes, direct access to Pennsylvania voting precincts, county tabulation centers, Wisconsin, Michigan, Nevada, Arizona, Georgia, all of that coming in directly from foreign countries, China being the predominant one.
It's lunacy. It's lunacy. I will levitate. China was not running the vote count in your state of Georgia or in any of these other states. These things have been investigated. People have run the audits of the elections. But again, the White House Chief of Staff gets a document from somebody like that. His job is to say, we have a problem, not who do I share it with.
Right, and I think that's the question, and that's why the January 6th committee is so intent on hearing from him, because that's what we still don't know. What did you do with the document? Who else got it? Who did you discuss it with? Did anyone else receive it? What was your response? And we've been saying this on your show a lot. If you have nothing to hide, then why not answer the questions? And that is what I think has former Rep. Meadows looking, not so great in the light, because people want him to just answer the questions about these documents.
Let's step back from this for 1 second. What are Republican elected officials in office right now saying about this? Absolutely nothing. They are tolerating this situation. That tells you where the Republican Party is right now.
It tells you that as much as we need to better fully understand the history, Election Day through January 6th, we need to understand it not just for the rearview mirror. We need to understand it because there are many people who think it will happen again.